Last week we had Walter Isaacson, the best-selling author of Steve Jobs, on the show, telling us about Jobs' life, his impact not only on Apple but on our broader culture. We, of course, have an insatiable desire for knowing what Steve Jobs did and could do and would do, even though he unfortunately is no longer with us. One man who knows a little bit about Steve Jobs is Carmine Gallo. Carmine is a communication specialist, a best-selling author, and the author of an excellent book called The Innovation Secrets of Steve Jobs. Carmine, welcome to TechCrunch TV.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
A couple of weeks ago, Carmine, you thrilled Paris, the Le Web audience, with a presentation about what Steve Jobs would do. So for our broader audience today, not only in Paris but around the world, what would Steve Jobs do in today's innovation economy?
Well, I think the first principle, and people think this is a soft skill, but the first thing that he would do, and the first piece of advice that he would give entrepreneurs especially, or people who have a dream of starting something, is to pursue that and to do what you love. A lot of people look at that type of advice and they dismiss it. And I'm not sure how we can dismiss it so easily, because it was Steve Jobs who said going to bed at night, being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. It's going to bed saying, I've done something wonderful. That's what matters. In fact, in the Isaacson book, there was that brilliant story, amazing story that I didn't know, about why Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997. And he told John Lasseter at Pixar, he said, the world is a better place with Apple in it, and I want to save it. So he thought at that level, what can I do to make me feel fulfilled, and how do we fulfill the lives of our customers? He just thought at a different level. It wasn't just about, I want to do something to make money. It's no, I want to do something to leave a legacy. I think more of us need to think that way.
Carmine, though, hasn't passion become the new orthodoxy?
Yeah.
And the challenge is not so much discovering our own passion, but knowing how to channel, bottle that orthodoxy. Because what Steve Jobs seemed so brilliant at was being in the zone in terms of pursuing that passion. And I know that's an area that you've given many people excellent advice on.
Well, I think that when you talk about passion, and this is what I talk about with my clients as well, who are executives of companies, they give very boring presentations, for example. Many of them, just dry, dull presentations. And then behind the scenes you ask them, but what are you really passionate about? What is it about your brand or your company or your product that you're truly passionate about? And the answers are completely different than what they talk about on stage in front of an audience. So I just recommend it's getting back to asking yourself, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it about your product or your industry that you are truly passionate about? And it goes beyond for many people, it does go beyond the obvious. When I had an interview, and this changed my thinking process as a communications specialist, I had a long interview with Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, and I've interviewed him a couple of times for my books and articles. He never mentions the word coffee. And I said, but don't you have a coffee company? He said, yeah, well, that's what we sell, but that's not what my brand stands for, and that's not what I am passionate about. I'm passionate about customer service. Coffee just happens to be the commodity that we use as that vehicle to improve the customer service experience. So you need to ask yourself, what is it about the product that I'm passionate about? And it goes so far beyond the obvious. But I think that's something that's helpful. It gives people fuel, it gives people energy to try new and innovative things.
I know what ties Schultz and Jobs together is their idea, their desire to sell dreams. What is it that's so important about selling dreams?
I love the idea of selling dreams, not products, because people don't give a darn about your product. They don't care about your brand. They don't care about you as much as they care about themselves, right? We're all human beings. We care about our hopes, our dreams, our ambitions. Once you start helping people fulfill their needs, starting from their perspective, not from the product perspective, you'll start winning people over. So that's what Steve Jobs did with the Apple stores, for example. Instead of just creating a store to sell Apple products, they turned around that relationship and thought to themselves, what can we do to create an experience to make our customers feel special? Once they started asking themselves that question, a whole bunch of innovations started popping up that we've never seen in retail, all thanks to the Apple Store. But they started by asking themselves a different question. Not how can we build a store or where should we build a store to push products to people. That's what most companies, I think, do. That's the mentality. Instead, Ron Johnson and Steve Jobs said, no, what can we do to help them get the most out of these products and achieve what they want to do?
Do you think the retail innovation may turn out in historical terms to be more significant in many ways than the hardware innovation from Steve Jobs' point of view?
I think it's huge. I think it's huge, and I think it's totally underappreciated what he has done. I've been researching this more and more, and what I have found is that there are a number of other retailers out there as well who are improving the customer service game based on what they're learning from Apple. And Apple is all about creating this experience from when you walk into the door and how employees and customers interact with each other. It's not just the design, it's the whole communication system that's going on. You don't even know what's happening, but by the end of that conversation, you feel really good. You've got a smile on your face.
Because in a sense, in the Apple Store, you're being sold a dream by employees who are as passionate about that dream as you are.
Yeah. And it starts with a hiring. Imagine that. It starts with a hiring of people who are diverse and interesting and friendly. There's a lot of components to that, but I think you're absolutely right. That's totally underappreciated, is innovation around the retail experience.
So, Carmine, there are going to be a lot of people watching this show who are scratching their heads over this idea of selling a dream. They may be in the infrastructure business. They may have a very simple app. They may be offering backbone technology. Can everyone sell a dream, whether or not it's an iPod, an iPhone, an iPad?
Yeah, I think it's more important that you consider and think about how to do that when it's a product or a service that is far more complex than something that is tangible. I've worked with nuclear scientists, for example, in the past. Nothing is more complicated than nuclear science. I'm absolutely convinced. And they use some of the same techniques that Steve Jobs used in pitching their products, okay? So it's all a matter of how to communicate a story and how to communicate the benefits that are relevant to your particular audience. So if it's a nuclear scientist, for example, they have to go to Congress to seek funding. Why are we going to give you money versus these other defense programs, for example? It's all about how are you communicating the real benefits behind your product. That's what Steve Jobs and Apple continue to do. Apple certainly continues to do this brilliantly, and most companies, I think, don't. So yeah, it's all about focusing on the customer.
Carmine, I know you're not a big fan of PowerPoints. In the Isaacson book, it was very clear that Jobs hated PowerPoints. Whenever anyone showed a PowerPoint, he would tear it down, critique it, embarrass the person showing it.
I'm not that mean, yes.
But you're a communications expert, and I think one of the great innovation secrets, perhaps not so much of a secret anymore, about Steve Jobs was his hatred of PowerPoints. What's the problem with PowerPoints, and what bigger problem do they reveal?
Okay, let's talk about that. I am not necessarily somebody who doesn't like PowerPoint. We have Microsoft PowerPoint at the office. I've used PowerPoint for webinars and many things. I happen personally to enjoy Apple Keynote presentation software, but I still use presentation software. Microsoft PowerPoint is not the enemy. It's just not used correctly. It's not used effectively, because scientists who study the way the brain processes information will tell you that you cannot put too many words on a screen and expect people to process that information well. It doesn't work. This is called picture superiority. Picture superiority simply means that information is retained better when it is presented as images and words instead of just words alone. So the reason why most people hate PowerPoint is because it's just a deck with as many words as possible. But if you watch a Steve Jobs presentation, it was completely the opposite. Very few words, very minimal, images, sometimes just images, sometimes images and just a few words, or even one phrase or one number in the middle of a slide. That is so much more interesting than filling a slide with clutter, text, words, numbers, and a lot of information that you don't even relate to oftentimes. So I don't think it's PowerPoint that's the problem. It's just the way people use it. If you watch a Steve Jobs presentation, he's using Keynote. You can do largely the same stuff in PowerPoint. So it's not so much I'm sure I'll probably get a lot of emails for that, but the point is it's not so much the presentation software that's the problem, it's how we're using it.
Carmine, nobody ever taught Steve Jobs how to speak. He never came to you to get your professional services. And of course, he was a genius, a natural showman, incredibly articulate. How do you help people who are less confident than Jobs, people who are uncomfortable speaking in public? You're a communications expert.
Yes.
What advice, apart from calling you up and having you come in and help them, what advice would you give people who still struggle to even express their passion in public?
The beauty of Steve Jobs was a brilliant showman, like you said, because he informed. He gave you the information. He delivered information like anybody would when they're launching a product. He educated you, though. He talked about why we're coming up with this product today. What are some of the needs that we know you have that haven't been fulfilled yet? And he entertained. He actually had fun in presentations, like crank calling Starbucks, when he was on the iPhone or whatever. He always had fun elements to the presentation. Most people don't have fun, and they think that a presentation now is all about delivering information instead of expressing their passion and telling stories. And Steve Jobs, a little thing that a lot of people don't know, is he really practiced to the nth degree. He knew every font on every slide. He knew exactly his mark, when he was going to hit it, how he was going to do a demo. So people tell me, oh, he looked effortless. Yeah, after dozens and dozens and dozens of hours on stage, sometimes 4 hours at a stretch, going through the whole presentation. Most people who I've worked with, when I ask them, how long have you practiced your last presentation, it's, oh, I looked at the slides on the plane on my way over here. There's part of the difference.
Well, Carmine Gallo, communications specialist, the author of The Innovation Secrets of Steve Jobs. I want to thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
Thank you. I appreciate it.